because I had some other things to do. I was actually thinking that this might be a fire drill. There's going to be a deal, and they'll announce it sometime this afternoon, and then I'll be free to go and do the things I had planned to do that Sunday. And that's how the day started.
At the Fed, negotiations had been going on through the night, and a deal looked close.
We had been in a conference call with our board in London, and I was on the call from here. I think it was around 9:30 or 10 when we finished the board meeting Sunday morning, New York time, and frankly, we're feeling cautiously optimistic.
And I think somebody said there may have been a handshake on a deal, and that it had to be run through the FSA in London.
There was a belief, even an assumption, that Lehman's was too big, too important to be allowed to fail. By now, the media were catching on to the story that something big was happening at the Fed.
At this point, all the main players were inside, and I basically just photographed anything that came out of the garage.
As soon as that gate goes up, we started shooting. We're looking for anything, any kind of movement, anybody in a suit. We don't know who we're looking for. And once we do see them, I can't recognize them because they're not like Paris Hilton. These people are not celebrities. So for me, you know, I'm shooting anybody in a suit. And then I figure I'll figure it out later.
One CEO did not have tinted windows, and he shielded his face with his hands, and it was just very telling that, you know, here are the titans of business who are, you know, lauded and you know, had been lauded, shielding their faces, perhaps ashamed, or I don't know why they were doing that.
Lehman Brothers CEO Dick Fuld has been backed into a corner, to say the least.
Fuld has very few options left. The stock in a free fall. A lot of things perhaps a bit too late here for Lehman in terms of owning up to some of the real estate.
Here we go. The bank and its boss had had a difficult relationship with the media.
Shares of Lehman Brothers have fallen 12% in the last week.
3 months earlier, when the press and news channels were full of reports questioning the health of Lehman Brothers, Dick Fuld had railed against them.
I'm also so tired of looking at my ugly picture in the goddamn newspapers. But the sore's close to the firm. You know, it could be a little hot dog guy who stands on the corner. He's close to the firm.
I think we in the media do not and are not responsible in any way for causing a run on the bank. I think that's absurd. I think some people would want to blame the messenger, but at the end of the day, you're talking about institutions that made choices to lever their balance sheets 30 or 40 times. Nobody in the media was forcing them to do that. They should have known better.
And the SEC is investigating 4 rumors that circulated about Lehman Brothers over the past 2 months.
But Dick Fuld thought the constant reporting of Lehman's plunging share price was creating a downward spiral.
We've got to close it down. You know, I make a joke out of it. It's no joke. This has got to end. The leakage hurts us. This is where the rumor mill comes from. It's where the misinformation comes from. We have a communications division. It's got to be controlled there. Anybody outside of that is not authorized to talk to the press, period.
But the man who was authorized to talk to the press found defending the firm to be a thankless task.
The atmosphere was quite surreal and also very unpleasant because there was this very well entrenched view among senior Lehman people that the outside world was against it. But when it came to it, the story was, does Lehman have the wherewithal to get to the other side? And they were right to ask the question, and we were not able to provide the answers.
Back at the Fed, Barclays was now close to making an offer for Lehman's. But like Bank of America before it, the British bank wanted guarantees for Lehman's debts so it could open for business the next day. Who would underwrite the deal? The American authorities? The British? No one seemed to have an answer.
The tone of the conversations was beginning to change, and you could hear in the voices of the Lehman representatives a higher level of doubt that things were going to work out.
There was deadlock. Lehman's and Barclays had come so far and were so close to a deal, but couldn't seal it without a guarantee in place. The telephone calls across the Atlantic were strained.
Midway through the Sunday afternoon, we, the FSA, informed the New York Fed categorically that from our perspective we couldn't see how this deal could go forward, given that they were not willing to offer any liquidity guarantees.
Lehman would be cut loose unless Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson authorized the guarantee. The teams of advisors were summoned. It was now or never.
We were asked to come to the main floor where the group of major banks was closeted behind these very heavy doors, and were asked to wait, and spent hours waiting there.
The tension was palpable as behind closed doors, Hank Paulson was on the phone to London. The fate of Lehman hung on this call, and time was running out. The markets in Europe would open in 12 hours. If the bank wasn't rescued by then, it would be too late.
I spoke to Hank Paulson on the Sunday afternoon, and he said, look, your regulators are asking hundreds of questions, and I made the point they're asking them with very good reason.
Eventually, Treasury Secretary Paulson came out and made an announcement.
The British government was not prepared to let Barclays continue with the transaction. I don't know what actually went on, but that's what we were told. And we asked the secretary whether there were certain things we could do, and his statement was that I'm not going to cajole or plead with the British government, nor am I going to in any way threaten the British government in terms of a relationship.
I think the Americans recognized that and knew that by Sunday afternoon, our time, the game was up. We couldn't possibly get ourselves into a situation where effectively we were guaranteeing an American bank.
To be absolutely categorically clear, the FSA did not stop the Barclays deal. Barclays never brought us a deal. Barclays never negotiated a deal that they thought was satisfactory from their own point of view, and therefore never proposed any deal to us.
We were quite prescriptive about what was going to work and what wasn't going to work, and what we wanted was not available. We walked. End of story.
You know, I think having worked on this for a number of days and having been pretty positive about if we could get all of the pieces lined up, I was gutted.
In the end, the sand had run out of the hourglass. Nothing would work at that point. It was beyond Dick. It was beyond Lehman. It was beyond all of us. It was really a decision for the United States.
Roger Cohen now had the unenviable task of reporting back to Dick Fuld. There will be no knight in shining armor. The British weren't coming.
It was as difficult a call as I have ever made in my life. He said, "This is just unbelievable. How can this possibly be happening?" We spent a few minutes going back over the same ground, and then he then shifted to, all right, is there anything else we can do?
With both Bank of America and Barclays having walked away, it was time for Plan C. There was no Plan C.
This was the first time he really, I think, to me, lost his composure a bit because now death was imminent.
Lehman's bankruptcy lawyers were summoned to the Fed and ushered into the main conference room.
We were told there isn't going to be a Barclays transaction, and therefore Lehman should be prepared to go into bankruptcy. And then suddenly they said, by midnight. And my response was, I don't understand what you're doing. Could you explain what the reason is for this action? And net, what they were saying, well, we really don't have to explain the reason. You need us to finance you, and we're not going to finance you unless you go into bankruptcy. Well, that's pretty compelling. But then with the conversation changed to you, we're speaking to the assemblage, do you understand what the consequences of this decision are and what's going to happen to the marketplace? And they said, we will take care of that.
Treasury officials were confident the fallout from the collapse of Lehman would be containable. News of the impending bankruptcy had already reached London. There will be no money coming from New York for the bank to open for business the following morning.
So it was absolutely clear the advice was Lehman UK had to file. It was insolvent. It was not going to be in a position to pay its debts as they fell due. So that reality had to be grasped. And there were polar reactions to that. There were the lawyers and the accountants who turned their minds to the practical challenge that now had to be met of organising the filing and thereafter dealing with the consequences of it. And then there were the commercial managers, traders and so on, who just couldn't believe that this was going to happen and couldn't focus immediately on what the consequences of that might be for the business or for themselves. They were just completely stunned by it.
As an open-air performance of Offenbach started in Brooklyn, across the water at the Fed, it was all but over.
We were basically told to get out. As we were going down to the garage, we were standing in the elevator and said, I don't think they like us. They basically threw us out. And it's a very serious situation. It was a very somber, sad voyage, if you want to call it that, going back to Lehman. As we approached the Lehman building, it was like pandemonium on 7th Avenue. And I remember there was an odd-looking man there, sort of with a spear, saying, "Down with Wall Street." And I said, well, this is going to be some evening.
We await word on the fate of the 158-year-old firm Lehman Brothers.
We are a minute from midnight in terms of outright catastrophe. We're a heartbeat away from a depression.
Dick Fuld was waiting for them up on the 31st floor.
When we went into the boardroom, you could tell without a lot of deep thought that Dick Fuld was very concerned, very worried, and I would say very depressed.
Dick asked me, "Are you telling me it is over?" And I said, "Yes, Dick. I have nowhere else to go. I am out of options. I can't think of anything else to do." He said something like, "Well, we really gave it every effort. I still can't believe it."
I saw a man sitting there sort of saying to himself, I don't understand how this happened. Where did we go wrong?
Behind closed doors, a final throw of the dice. It so happened that a second cousin of President Bush worked at Lehman Brothers. Could the commander-in-chief succeed where central bankers had failed? What took place remains a matter of dispute. Larry McDonald was told about it by colleagues who were there, although the story is denied by George Walker.
They've tried everything, and they kind of all gathered around George. There was some hope that he would reach out to the president, and in essence we would go around Hank Paulson and give our message of potential worldwide financial destruction that Lehman would cause directly to the president. You know, the president is his cousin, but to reach out to the White House under duress is a very stressing situation for everybody. He was in a sweat, and finally he agreed to make that call to the White House. The operator put him on hold, which to the people in the room seemed just like an eternity. And as the seconds ticked by, everybody was, more intense. Everybody's pulses